Hello and welcome to this extended highlight video of the EMU Japan race in Zwift. This has been run on the Downtown Titans course in the B category. So quick disclaimer, the last 2 kilometers of this race, the screen recording got cut, but you still have the live action footage of me pedaling on the bike and I've zoomed into the monitor, so you can still roughly see what's going on. Anyway, just about to kick off the race here. So typical fast start for a Zwift race. I'd got into that pen nice and early, so I had a nice front row starting position. So the course is 25 kilometers long and there's 250 meters of elevation. So there's 2 distinct climbs on the route. The first one is the Titans Grove Reverse KOM. And this one is a climb that lasts about 1.5 to 2 minutes. Average gradient's about 6.5%, and it's a very consistent gradient all the way up that climb. It's a fast enough climb that drafting can be effective in a bunch, but it's hard enough that breaks they're pretty frequent up that climb. So for me, more of a sprinty rider, struggle up the climbs. It's one of those points in the race where I have to be sharp. So the second climb in the race is the Zwift KOM. This climb comes in about 17 kilometers into the race, and it's similar in length, well, similar in duration anyway, to the Titans Grove climb, but the difference here is the gradient. The Zwift climb is much steeper, and splits frequently happen up this climb. And surprisingly, I find they don't often happen on the steep part of the climb. It's actually at the top. The gradient kind of rolls over and reduces to a false flat at the top of the climb, and people get complacent. They reduce their power, they ease off, and they allow people to peel off the front of the pack. So I'm going to be really alert when we get to the top of that climb and make sure I don't ease up too much and allow people to escape just over the top of the brow of the hill. So after the typical mad start, the race settled down. It was quite easy, to be honest. Like you can see here, the power numbers dipping below the 200s quite frequently. And I'm just going to fast forward the action here because we're about to get to the first interesting part of the race. So I mentioned when looking at the profile, there's 2 main climbs. But prior to that first climb, there's a pretty ugly section, which is the entrance to the Titans Grove rollers. These rollers, it's a series of up and down little mini hills, but the general trend is upwards. So through these rollers, you do a lot more climbing than you do descending. So if we take a look at the profile now, you'll see, it's just prior to that first Titans Grove Reverse KOM. This general upward trend of the gradient, but within that, you can't see it because we're too zoomed out on that profile, but there is these up and down little mini hills that you're going to see here in the footage. So I'm just going to fast forward when we get into the meat of the rollers in a second, but one thing I find interesting in the way I perform on these rollers compared to many people in this group is that I think I take it a lot easier on the downhills and I give it a lot more power on the uphills. I think part of that could be to my training setup. So you can see the video of me down bottom left. My bike is pitching backwards and forwards. I've got a kicker bike and it changes the pitch with gradient. On top of that, I set Zwift to 100% difficulty. So when I'm going up one of these climbs at 7-8%, my bike's tilting back on me and I'm getting the full effect of that high resistance, which encourages me to get out the saddle and really give it a high power effort up those climbs. Conversely though, when I'm going down the hill, the bike pitches forwards, the resistance eases off a lot, and I'm kind of encouraged to not do an awful lot, ease off the pedals. You can see here, if you look at the video, I'm off the front of the pack. And this is really a symptom of me giving it way more than other people are going up the hill. But you'll see me shortly going down the hill, I give it kind of less than 100 watts, almost freewheel at times. And it allows the pack to kind of swarm over me and go ahead. So I think, most people I know who Zwift don't have their trainer on 100% difficulty. They have it about 50%. So that kind of smooths the resistance level that their trainer is providing to them. So it means they can do more of a consistent power delivery irrespective of it being an incline or a decline. So whereas my power delivery it's quite a stark contrast between incline and decline because my resistance is changing an awful lot because I'm exposed to 100% effect of the gradient within the game. So we're at the first big climb of the day, the Titans Grove Reverse KOM, and I'm still in the front group, which is good. And you'll see this climb in a second. We go a quick left, right, and then it's a general left-hand curve up a kind of 6-7% gradient, but it's pretty steady all the way up. And the aim for me here is to just keep contact with this front group. I'm kind of expecting to slip back a bit, so I position myself kind of mid to front pack right now. And I put in quite an effort on these lower slopes, expecting to kind of gradually get drawn back through the pack as the climb progresses. Now, despite most climbs scaring me, because I'm more of a sprinter than a climber, I'm not too fussed about this one. I think I'm going to keep contact with this pack, or contact enough to recover it on the downhill and the flats thereafter. So I'm not too worried about this. To be honest, it's the Zwift KOM. That's the one I'm really worried about in kind of 10 kilometers time or so. So what I found here was the pace going up this climb was a lot lower than normal. So I'm normally, by now, I'm way back in the pack, but it kept it, for me, around threshold, just a bit over for some time until about now. So you can see on the map, top right, the group is starting to get drawn out, starting to thin out a bit. And I start to get out of the saddle, you can see bottom left there. Start to apply higher power, getting up towards 400 watts to make sure that if there's... I could sense this split coming. I could see this group here in front of me just forming, and I wanted to get into that rather than be stuck in a group 2 just behind me. So yeah, I'm nicely in amongst that front group now, and yeah, still out the saddle, still applying kind of 400 watts or so. But yeah, because of the easier start to the climb, I had this energy to give later on up the hill. So yeah, so far so good. Front group up to the foot of the climb. And yeah, in this front small selection, coming towards the top of the effort here. So as we come to the top of the climb, two things to note. One, a very hidden finish to the climb. It's just a painted line on the road. You can see on the map, top right, those two pylons, they're not actually featuring in game. There you go. There's that small line on the road. And another thing to notice, top right, is there's a split that's happened. You can see we've got a nice group 1. And as we start to go around these hairpins in a minute, you'll see there's a distinct separation, and there's that small group 2 behind. So yeah, there's a split happened as I feared it would, but luckily I got to the front of it. So as we're winding down these hairpins, I'm having a look at the map, top right, just to see how many riders do I think have been dropped from that climb. And I figure that we've probably got about 20 riders in this front group. We've dropped only a small portion of riders didn't make it up that climb with us because there was already a split prior to that. But nevertheless, we're a third into the race. We're down to half the pack in the front group. So yeah, it's been a series of good efforts to whittle the pack down to this size. Now I've slowed the footage down here to mark this point where we enter another series of Titans Grove rollers. And at this point, we're just going to come into quite a distinct uphill section where we get to 4-5%. And in many races I do, this really kicks off here. And another split can happen. You get people who are complacent, they've done the big climb, they've recovered on the descent, and this series of rollers surprises them. And this climb in particular really catches some people out. So I was primed, ready to get to the front here, as I have done in the footage. But it didn't really happen. Like the pace was pretty pedestrian. So yeah, we stick quite comfortably in the front of the group, doing often around threshold power. You can see me on the descents. I really ease off and start to freewheel at times. So yeah, still in the front group going through these rollers, no big dramas, and yeah, we're setting up nicely for the final portion of the race. So much in keeping with this race, the descent, pretty standard. Like no one really tried to break away. You can see me being the laziest of the bunch, often going into a super tuck when I can. And we just make our way along the flat now into the underwater section, which is, yeah, even more flat, but has a slight rise at the end of it. So, yeah, in these tunneled sections, I'm always wary on the exits of the tunnel because breaks can happen there. But I'm going to slow the footage down in a second to show, yeah, not a break, but just really low pedestrian efforts. So here, look, I'm getting into 200, 180 watts, which for a B category race of this length, you rarely drop to these power levels. So yeah, pretty strange race, going quite slow, but it did get me wondering about what kind of efforts are people going to put up the final climb. So yeah, I'm taking a breather now while I can, because I'm suspecting that final Zwift KOM hill is going to be spicy. So here we go, we're just about to exit the tunnel, and often it really gets quite aggressive out of here. You can often get me doing 550, 600 watts trying to stay up with some adventurous breakaway riders, but again, as is characteristic with this race, it didn't really happen. You can see me here, tipping into 400 watts or so, and you can see a few guys get off the front there, but because it was only a couple, I was content to let them go. I thought as a mob, we'll be able to hunt them down later, and I'm not going to put any effort in above 450 watts to get them back. And straight away, as soon as we exited the tunnel, people again started to ease off. I was able to duck below 200 watts for a fair amount of time. And once we're on the flat proper, is back to kind of tempo, slightly under threshold efforts, and the occasional drop below 200 watts again. So here we are, taking it quite easy until we're going to get to the foot of that Zwift KOM climb. And remember, this is about a 2-minute climb, quite aggressive gradient, 7-8%, with a false flat finish, which can be deceptive and cause breaks as people ease off too early. So here we go, onto the climb proper. So far, so good. I've stuck with the guys at the front. You can see 2 riders there just peeling off the front of the group. I'm not too worried about the odd 1 or 2 people getting ahead of us. We should be able to catch them up on the flat and then the descent after the climb. You will see 2 A category riders that we're just about to approach here. Their race started a minute before ours, so they've obviously fallen out the back of that race and we're just about to swallow them up. And as is typical with my racing style, I'm pretty good at doing these bursts of 400 to 450 watts out the saddle, but then I do need a little rest. So this climb's kind of perfect for me because as we get to this hairpin, it flattens out. You see my power drops right the way down to 150 watts, and then I get back out the saddle up to 400 or so watts, and I can just about hold that power for the last bits of this ramp before we get onto the false flat. So that's the climb proper done, but as you'll know, as I'm paranoid about, there's this false flat section. So you think you finished, and then it just ramps up again to like 3-4%. And this is where people make their break for it. So you can see a few guys gone down the road. I'm pretty paranoid about this section, so I've got back on the gas, getting out of the saddle just to tag onto the back of them to make sure that a decent sized group doesn't get away from us. So our little breakaway that we formed on the false flat, it seemed at this stage to be doing quite well. I thought we might be able to hold it till the finish, but quickly the main peloton reeled us back in. So my decision to put that extra effort in to get with the front guys on the false flat at the top of the climb, it wasn't quite justified, but often it is. So I still think every time I'm going to go for that. Every time we get to that false flat, I'm going to put in that extra little dig to try and claw back onto anyone who breaks away at that time. But here we are, just coming to the end of the descent. I'm doing super tuck, and yeah, the big group has formed, ready for the final. There's a subtle climb coming up, and then we've got a few rollers leading into the finish on the final couple of K. So we're getting there, nearly there. There's going to be one distinct ramp left, and then we're going to hit a rollers section before we have a flat kind of 1.5K run into the finish. So we go through this Italian village bit here. Soon we're going to take a bridge that goes across the water, and then there'll be a right-hand turn and a ramp up that lasts about 30 seconds. And this has always been crucial for me. People try and escape up this ramp, and it's another one that has that kind of subtle rollover at the top, and it's there where you can make a little extra effort to force a breakaway. So I deployed my feather here, and yeah, I managed to stick with the front of the group again. But 2 guys started to break away. By But I know the rollers quite well here, and it's always surprising how much ground you can recover on the rollers if you pace them right. So I wasn't too worried about those two guys there. I certainly wasn't going to make an effort on my own to bridge across to them. So I thought I'd just let other people make that effort, tag onto them, and kind of operate efficiently over the rollers to reel them in over time. Now, I mentioned at the start, my feed went down. Dodgy Wi-Fi cut the connection between my Apple TV and the MacBook that was recording it all. So unfortunately, this is all I've got. It's me in the garage, and I've zoomed in on that monitor so you can get a rough idea of what's going on. But all there is now, there's 2K to the finish. We've got a rollers section, which is quite similar to Titan's Grove, but not quite as severe. And through the rollers, I adopt that similar approach of powering up the climbs, taking it easy on the descents. And I really find that I'm more effective speed-wise over the rollers adopting that strategy than if I take a more even powered approach. I know normalized power is probably going to hurt me a lot. I'm probably expending more energy overall doing it that way, but I think in terms of maintaining speed, it just seems really effective. Anyway, you can see I'm freewheeling here because we've gone through the rollers. We're on the flat lead into the finish. I'm just trying to save every last bit of energy. And you can see at this point, there's about 700 meters to go, and a few people peel off at the front. They make an early sprint at about 400 meters. The pace has been ramping up from 700 meters. You can see that it's going to 350, 400, and eventually we get to 500 watts, kind of that big crescendo of power that I do struggle with. And that's why I let the guys go at 400 meters, and I didn't kick until 200. You can see me here putting out just over 1,000 watts, trying to claw them back in. I managed to burst through the group of people I was cycling with, but I just couldn't bridge across to the guys who'd gone down the road early. So I ended up finishing 6th overall. I got upgraded to 5th when I looked at the Zwift power results. The Zwift leaderboard had me in 18th place, but that's because it included all of the A racers who'd set off 1 minute earlier than we did. So yeah, when it came to B racers, I finished 6th, which I'm pretty happy with. At the start of the day, when I looked at the course and saw those 2 significant climbs, I thought, yes, probably not for me. I'm not a climber. I survive over the climbs. But this time I survived in the front group. And yeah, I did let the odd break go of 1 or 2 people down the road, but none of those stuck. And I didn't think they would at the time. So it looks like I made the right calls during the race. And the big thing for me is I want to be able to get to the finish with enough gas in the tank to have a crack at the sprint. And yeah, I did that this time. I had a decent sprint effort. If I had to change something, it's when I launched that sprint. So this time we were ramping up that power, that typical crescendo you get at the end, and it gets to like 450, 500 watts. And I really struggle to make that jump from 500 to 1,000 watts and still have enough gas to put out a decent duration of sprint. So that's why this time, when the guys jumped at 400 meters, I was reluctant to follow them, and I waited another couple of 100 meters till I launched my sprint. I did reel them in a bit at the end, but I just couldn't make it back to them, and I couldn't get into that front group of 4 or 5 that went down the road. So if I was to change anything, it would be that. I think next time I've just got to jump when they do. If they go at 400 meters, I've just got to take a chance, do my sprint then, and hopefully I can hold on to the end. I don't think I'll be able to, but next time I'm just going to try it anyway. But certainly that's the thing I've got to improve is when I execute my sprint and my ability to tolerate those high powers, those 450, 500 watts, before I then launch a sprint of kind of 900,000 watts. So yeah, that's what I'm going to work on. But next time, definitely, I'm jumping earlier. If they go at 400 meters, so am I. Okay, thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you next time.